grappling with uncertainty, seeking inspiration from above, feeling the bonds of community, and learning the ways that separating brings us closer together. If these are themes, challenges, or experiences in your life, this episode is for you. Please sit a while and enjoy the journey. Welcome to Inner Bloom Meditations, a podcast of poetry, affirmations, and mindfulness. Today, we're going to be continuing our journey into Khalil Gibran's The Prophet, a very powerful and potent book, and one that is near and dear to my heart. As a quick recap from the one chapter that we've dove into so far, the Prophet, Al-Mustafa, climbed a hill, looked to the ocean, and saw the ship that he had been waiting for years to come for him. And in seeing it, he experienced a great joy, ready to return to his homeland. But as he descended the hill, a sadness came upon him, and that he had to sit with and grapple with. And he did so beautifully. And he moved himself directly into action and forward into acceptance and empowerment, and spoke of the beauty of his experience. And now we find him, just having navigated his emotions, walking towards the city, and the people of that city begin to gather about him. And that is where our journey begins. So, let's dive in. Khalil Gibran's The Prophet. And as he walked, he saw from afar men and women leaving their fields and their vineyards and hastening towards the city gates. And he heard their voices calling his name and shouting from field to field, telling one another of the coming of his ship. And he said to himself, "Shall the day of parting be the day of gathering? And shall it be said that my eve was in truth my dawn? And what shall I give unto him who has left his plow in mid-furrow, or to him who has stopped the wheel of his winepress? Shall my heart become a tree heavy laden with fruit, that I may gather and give unto them? And shall my desires flow like a fountain, that I may fill their cups? Am I a harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? A seeker of silences am I, and what treasure have I found in silences that I may dispense with confidence? If this is my day of harvest, in what fields have I sowed the seed, and in what unremembered seasons? If this indeed be the hour in which I lift up my lantern, it is not my flame that shall burn therein. Empty and dark shall I raise my lantern, and the guardian of the night shall fill it with oil, and he shall light it also." These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid, for he himself could not speak his deeper secret. And when he entered into the city, all the people came to meet him, and they were crying out to him as with one voice. And the elders of the city stood forth and said, "Go not yet away from us. A noontide have you been in our twilight, and your youth has given us dreams to dream. No stranger are you among us, nor a guest, but our Son and our dearly beloved. Suffer not yet our eyes to hunger for your face. And the priest and the priestesses said unto him, Let not the waves of the sea separate us now, and the years you have spent in our midst become a memory. You have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. Much have we loved you, but speechless was our love, and with veils has it been veiled. Yet now it cries aloud unto you, and would stand revealed before you. And ever has it been known that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. And others came also, and entreated him, but he answered them not. He only bent his head, and those who stood near saw his tears falling upon his breast. And he and the people proceeded towards the great square before the temple, and there came out of the sanctuary a woman whose name was Almitra, and she was a seeress. And he looked upon her with exceeding tenderness, for it was she who had first sought and believed in him when he had been but a day in the city. And she hailed him, saying, Prophet of God, in quest of the uttermost, long have you searched the distances for your ship, and now your ship has come, and you must needs go. Deep is your longing for the land of your memories, and the dwelling place of your greater desires, and our love would not bind you, nor our needs hold you. Yet this we ask ere you leave us, that you speak to us, and give us of your truth, and we will give it unto our children, and they unto their children, and it shall not perish. In your aloneness you have watched our days, and in your wakefulness you have listened to the weeping and the laughter of our sleep. Now therefore disclose us to ourselves, and tell us all that has been shown you of that which is between birth and death. And he answered, People of Orphalese, of what can I speak, save of that which is even now moving within your souls? Then Almitra said, Speak to us of love. I think that's a good part for us to transition from. Ending with the word love is very powerful. And ending with the words of Almitra, the seeress, the woman who emerged from sanctuary. I think ending with her voice and ending with that word, that feels good. And it gives us some time to reflect, some time to explore and sit with what we've just read. It's so beautifully and so well executed. It's like a gift that just keeps on giving. Every time that I return to it, I gain something new, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm grateful to be able to sit here and take those some things and share them with you. And I'm sure you have something that comes up for you even before I share. And I hope you sit with that too. And I hope that you let that take root, be it a curiosity, a feeling of wonder, or even a feeling of love or gratitude. And so I think I'll begin with that first paragraph, when he was walking into the city and he saw the people coming to him, and he said, Shall the day of parting be the day of gathering, and shall it be said that in truth my eve was in fact my dawn? I like these words coming together, parting and gathering. In the last book, in the last bit that we read, in the opening paragraphs, it actually begins by telling us that this book takes place in the month of Elul, the month of reaping. And so this idea of seeing the people gathering around him and saying, "Shall the day of parting indeed be the day of gathering?" And I think there's kind of a deeper meaning there, something that he dives into a little bit later, right? He mentions that if today is the day of harvest, I believe, what seeds has he sown and in what unknown fields? And so there's this idea of parting and gathering coming together as one. I think the word harvest is perfect for that. By parting the fruit, right, from the tree on which it has grown and gathering it together, this is how we gain our abundance. It is the coming together of the two things, of the separation and the togetherness. And then he goes on to say, "Shall my eve in truth be my dawn?" I think, well, first off, I would like to mention how I think that's a reference to the last section itself, that he is a dawn unto his own day, right? As are we. And even in our eves, we are in fact dawns. We know this to be true, that as the sun sets here, it is rising somewhere else. We live in the full circle of the world, of life, and of experience. And so these things that could be viewed as disparate, as separate, like parting and gathering, and eve versus dawn, these two things are actually deeply tied together. And then he says, "Shall my heart become a tree heavy laden with fruit?" And I think that's kind of another beautiful thing. Also, again, referencing what we talked about last week, the beauty in heavy things, in heavy emotions, in difficult emotions. Here, he describes the beauty of a tree, of a full tree, ready for harvest, as heavy laden, a phrase and a word that we can use to describe ourselves or experiences or times of our lives that were difficult, right? When we had things upon our shoulders and weights upon our mind, our body. And so being able to see this change of context, that word heavy laden can be a beautiful thing and a very desirable thing, I think also helps with that paradigm shift, that we know when we are heavy with certain things, including emotions, these are the fruits of what it is to be human, of what it is to exist in this world in this way. And so when we are heavy laden, there's much fruit to be harvested, right? And it can be harvested in many ways. We mentioned last time being able to create poetry or visual art, right? It can also be harvested by connecting with the ones we love and sharing and talking with them. If they're heavy enough, sometimes the way to harvest them is through a good cry, through just deeply sitting with those emotions. And speaking of sitting with those things and connecting with the ones we love, when he sees those people gathering about, he asks if his desires will flow like a fountain to fill up their cup, right? And so in this connection, what he wishes to give them is his own desires, right? And I think that's something too, and I know I'm speaking from a lot of personal experience here, as somebody who has navigated a lot of the terrain of anxiety and uncertainty, and knowing that that's a common terrain for a lot of us, I really enjoy the idea of sharing these things that I feel and I hope have something to offer to you. So this reframing here too, that what he wishes to give is effectively his desires. And I know certainly there can be ways of viewing our desires, right, as things that are maybe undesirable or rather undesirable for others, right? That we would not want to let them know what they are, or we would feel heavy in wanting to share and communicate those. And so, here again, another beautiful way to see this. Shall my desires flow like a fountain, that I may fill their cups? He is understanding of the sharing of desires that we all have, right? I think one of the ways that I understand this is that this is a man who has curated very beautiful desires, right? He has curated these desires to care and love and share, and so those can flow from him, right? And also that he desires, as Almitra said later, he is in quest of the utmost, right? And in some sense, we all are, right? There are many shared things that we are all seeking: love, connection, satisfaction, or at least contentedness, right? There are many things that we are all sharing in this shared experience of what it is to be human. And so it can feel good to share in those desires. It can feel good to sit in a space where we feel connected to and seen by and understood with another person in their experience of desire. And he says, am I a harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? And so now it feels as though we've kind of moved from a contemplation of self, and now we get to look out to something greater. And maybe the desires internally were the first piece of that, the inner world giving birth to something, letting those desires flow. And now he looks to the outer world and says, am I a harp that the hand of the mighty may touch me, or a flute that his breath may pass through me? The next step of his practice is to accept the flow and beauty of these things from the outer world inside, be that divine inspiration, confidence, motivation, wisdom, right? But it is something that is passing through him and making music and making something melodic and beautiful. He follows that by saying, a seeker of silences am I, juxtaposing this concept of playing music, or of there being music, with silences. And what treasure have I found in silences that I may dispense with confidence? So again, grappling a little bit with doubt or uncertainty, or at least not knowing. And then he finds himself confident. And then he finds himself in a place of being able to surrender and to know that things will be taken care of. He says, if this indeed be the hour in which I lift up my lantern, it is not my flame that shall burn therein. Empty and dark shall I raise it, and the guardian of the night shall fill it with oil, and he shall light it also. And this is kind of that moment of a phrase that my parents used to use a lot is letting go and letting God. Let go and let God. You know, and moving it away from those types of terminology, even just saying, going with the flow, accepting things as they are. I think we may have referenced Taoism in our talks before, and Taoism has this concept of non-resistance, right? And so we find ourselves in that space and acknowledge that good things can happen and good things will happen. And by sitting in that beauty and in sitting in that mindset, we bring them about. And then he says, and I think to some degree it's important for you to know as a listener, that Khalil Gibran is also an artist. He is a visual artist who had his work shown here in the US, in Paris, and in other places. And it's also printed here in the book. And so this next very small paragraph, 3 sentences, each only about 6 or 7 words, is placed directly next to one of his illustrations. To describe it, it is 3 people, one of them a bit larger than the other, drawn in an almost Renaissance manner, black and white sketched, reaching down from the heavens, leaning on the clouds, and with one finger touching the surface of a body of water. Knowing him, I'd say it's the ocean, right? But all of their faces are covered. We see them not. And in fact, one of them, certainly at least one of them, seems to have his head tucked into his elbow, right? Potentially a vision of sadness, potentially a vision of comfort. I think it's worthwhile for you to go and look at it yourself and decide. But the words attached to that picture say, "These things he said in words, but much in his heart remained unsaid, for he himself could not speak his deeper secret." And I think the way I understand that image and the way I understand those words, they pair beautifully, right? Even if he wanted to, they say he could not speak his deeper secret. And I don't think it's for lack of willpower, right? Or of self-discipline, or of any type of inability to articulate, right? This is a man who sits in silences and reflects deeply. But there are things within us that cannot be said, that cannot be spoken, that cannot be quantified. There's much in us that can only be experienced, right? The ineffable, right? To reference a poem that he speaks later on, I believe the one on self-knowledge, he says that we should not bring measuring rods to our inner worlds. These are things that, he doesn't say this is me adding some. These are things we can just live in and feel deeply and not necessarily bring into words because they are higher, deeper, further, and beyond words, like the experience of a higher power, like that guardian of the night who he raises his lantern empty and the guardian fills it and lights it, right? It is that spark. It is that power. It is that something deeper. And next, the elders of the city speak out to him and they beg him to stay. And there's a really beautiful progression here of words. And I think this is a part where that kind of creative writing side of myself comes into play. And so he uses a sentence here that I very much appreciate, where the elders are speaking to him and they say, "No stranger are you among us, nor a guest, but our son and our dearly beloved." And so there are exactly 4 ways that they reference him, right? And those 4 ways are no stranger, nor guest, our son, and dearly beloved, right? And so if we were to just say those 4 nouns in order, right? Stranger, guest, son, and beloved. And you just see that beautiful progression, that beautiful rising, right? Honestly, I would say this is a good example of unfolding. We may experience others as strangers. Certainly at some point in time, they did experience him as a stranger. But in their time together, they grew closer to him, right? And he became a guest, and then a son, and their dearly beloved. And so this was the unfolding and the blooming of their relationship in a sense. And they finish, the elders finish by saying, Suffer not yet our eyes to hunger for your face. Man, that's a good one. Man, that's a good one. If somebody were to say that to me, uh, maybe it's my sensitive astrological placements, but I would be remiss to walk away from that. And I'm sure he feels the same. I'm sure this is difficult for him to hear and think about going. And I'm very grateful to Almitra here in a little bit coming to speak up on his behalf, right? But before she does, the priests and priestesses have their turn, right? And they say some beautiful things as well. Let not the waves of the sea separate us now, which we'll learn in just a poem or two. That is one way to see the sea, right? As something that separates us. And it's a totally valid way to see the sea, right? But there is more than one way to see things, right? There are multiple perceptions. And later on, we're going to get a little something from Khalil that actually talks about the sea as connecting things, right? And I will save that for then because it's beautiful, but look forward to it. And look forward to, honestly, all of the unfolding of his relationship and his appreciation for the sea, for the ocean, for the vast and sleepless mother, as he calls her. The priests and priestesses also say, you have walked among us a spirit, and your shadow has been a light upon our faces. And what a beautiful way to live. Again, bringing it back to the dawn upon his own day, right? Even his shadow is a light upon their faces. And that is, I think, one way to imagine right being. In what way can we live that even our shadow, if you will, is a light, right? And I think there are many answers to that, right? One of those could be to just live a beautiful life, right? And a giving and cherishing life, right? That your shadow represents just your presence, right? That you are here under the sun. And I think another way to see this, and this one, again, kind of my own thoughts and reflections, is a small message of the beauty of accepting our shadow self, right? This is a phrase used a lot in spiritual and metaphysical circles of shadow work and of joining or having union, right, with the shadow self. It borrows terminology certainly from Jungian archetypes and Jungian psychology, but it's this idea of those things which are, if you will, darker within us, right? If you subscribe to astrology, these would kind of be the stereotypes that a lot of people talk about. Like, oh, this sign is very sensitive, or that sign is very assertive, or this sign is very guarded, right? And I think whether or not you believe in astrology or subscribe to it, all of us have these different experiences of life and these different things that make us up as we know ourselves. And certainly we can work on those. But they are also, to some degree, traits of who and how we navigate this world. And so if that is a part of your natural experience, is to experience something and respond with sensitivity, or experience it through the lens of sensitivity, or you are a person who asserts, right? There are ways to work with that. And I'm not here to now at least teach or prescribe any methodologies, though there are many. But there are ways to work with that and come to an understanding of that part within ourselves and to love that part of ourselves, right? So we can remind ourselves, in at least this way, that we are still worthy of love, even with parts of us that are shadow, if you will. And so this idea of somebody's shadow being a light for another person is beautiful, you know, and can have those many meanings. And it can be very empowering for one person to see another person who has similar struggles to them, right? A shadow in a similar shape to theirs, if you will, and still doing well and still finding strengths and overcoming weaknesses, if we'll call them that, right? And so in that way, our shadow becomes a light to another. And finally, just as that last paragraph or that last stanza had a real strong finisher, suffer not yet our eyes, right, to hunger for your face. The priests and priestesses brought one out too. They said, and ever has it been known that love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation, right? And that is something that deeply resonates with me. I know that there is a poem out there, and if any of you if any of you has access to this, if you know what I'm talking about, you are one of the very few people, and I would be eternally grateful to you if you could send this to me, DM it to me or whatever, right? Whatever modality of connection you can find. There exists a form of a poem or a reflection of a poem, The Sleep of Endymion. It's an odd story, but it basically only existed on a certain type of phone, and it was built in to the phone, but then they deleted that built-in app, and I've never seen it since. And it too is gone now and somehow closer to me, even if I can't remember those words. In it, they discuss the ways in which we grow closer to people who are no longer with us. And I don't remember specifically if it was in reference to somebody who has passed, right? But I know that I found it around the time that somebody in my life had passed. And there was just this beautiful reframing where they said something like, let me try to remember. They said something like, and the mortal man is now seen through the eyes of infinity, and in death truly is closer to us than he ever could have been while alive. For he is in our thoughts and in our hearts more truly than ever before. Those words help me a lot, you know, in dealing with that loss. And I think here, this resonates with that. Love knows not its own depth until the hour of separation. And it doesn't have to be death, right? You know, it can be your visiting friend who's now done with vacation and has to go, or your good friend who's moving away, or just after a beautiful night with friends, that feeling of missing them instantly when you get back home, right? Love comes to know itself, right? When it has that backdrop of that person not being right there. It's like the contrast that colors have. When the black behind them is darker, the colors are so much brighter, right? And so it says that others came to him also and entreated him, but he answered them not. He only bent his head, and those who stood near saw his tears falling upon his breast. And so his sadness was something personal, but people who are close to us can see that, right? And so it's really beautifully written. Not just that he has sadness, but at least that he's seen and perceived, right? And him and these people, they proceed. And they proceed to the sanctuary from which Al-Mitra emerges. And I think it's so beautiful that she emerges from a sanctuary of all places. And what does he do? He looks up at her with exceeding tenderness. Another beautiful phrase. Exceeding tenderness. For it was she who had sought and believed in him when he had been but a day in their city. And so we know this woman to be somebody who represents safety and who represents a level of intuition and trust, right? I'm sure we all know somebody like that. I'm sure in a lot of ways we are like that and can become even more like that should we wish. And even the place that she sees him, right? They are in the square in front of the temple. And squares, kind of like numerology in the power and beauty of shapes, squares represent safety. Squares represent strength and foundation and, to a degree, completeness. And that is where he stands in this moment. And so Al-Mitra says to him, Prophet of God, in quest of the uttermost, long have you searched the distances for your ship, and your ship has come. And even that phrasing, the referencing of him, she calls him Prophet of God, starting with the word prophet. In fact, I'm actually kind of wondering, this might be the first time the word prophet is used in this book. Let's see. That's really beautiful. I think that it is. I actually think that it is. And we've heard many titles from this point, right? Al-Mustafa, the chosen and the beloved. Later, we heard of the elders and the priests and the priestesses and Al-Mitra, the seeress. And her first word, right? The person who sees is to say prophet, prophet of God, and in quest of the uttermost. So this is beautiful, I think, a new realization for me that he is not referring to himself as this, but the world around him and the people around him are affirming this for him, right? And she uses this phrase, in quest of the uttermost. And I like that a lot. Like we mentioned earlier, what are those desires with which he could fill somebody's cup, right? Here, she's not saying you are somebody who has held the uttermost, who works with the utmost, not even somebody who has seen it, but just somebody in quest of. And it is the desire and the journey towards that that makes him who he is and how he is. With the uttermost as our goal, what else could we become but more fulfilled and a brighter light for ourselves, others, and the world around us? What are those things? I think if you've listened to the first episode, if you go and listen to that one of the questions that we ask is, what is your North Star, right? What is the book, the idea, the philosophy, the thinker, the modality that you look to for guidance, right? And in some ways, right, it can be something defined and someone defined. And in some way, I think we can loosely define the utmost, but in a sense, it too is ineffable. But to seek it and to ask the better question of what it is and might be brings us somewhere more beautiful, more intentional, right? Somewhere in which we unfold further and further in front of ourselves. And that is how the prophet is the prophet. And that is how she knows him. And she goes on to say that he must need go, but their love will not bind him, nor their needs hold him. So they're not attaching to the point of keeping him, but also not denying their love or that they're experiencing this as a need, right? But instead that they very much feel that and still wish not to bind him, but to love him, and to love him in such a way that they empower him to go to his freedoms and desires. And all they want is to teach them before he goes. To be able to leave somebody with words, and words of intentionality, and maybe even words of beauty, should we be so lucky, right? Is a beautiful thing. And it's something that she says they will share with their children, and their children unto their children, right? And so these words can continue to live and carry our source and our power within them, just as Khalil Gibran put his into these words, and we're still sitting with them here, unfolding their power and their beauty. So the last thing she says in this part: disclose us to ourselves and tell us all that has been shown to you of that which is between birth and death. A beautiful way to phrase it. And I think a great way of understanding that life doesn't necessarily begin with birth, nor does it end with death, right? This is our experience of it in this physical form, right? And that is something we will also dive into actually very much towards the end of this book, of the many forms that life takes, the many forms that we take, and how beautiful they are. And then Almitra says, in response to his question, when he says, what can I speak save of that which is even now moving within your souls? And she says, speak to us of love. And I think, I said it earlier, that's a beautiful word to end on, and a beautiful voice speaking it. Almitra, the seeress. It's a blank slate. He says, of what can I possibly teach you? And she says, love. If we find ourselves in places of openness, infinite possibility, and even uncertainty, why not think of love? Why not let that be the first and the last, a motivating factor, an object for reflection, right? A modality to exist in. It feels good to live in love. It feels good to let love be a deciding factor, to let love be one of those northern lights we mentioned. And it feels good to pour a little love into this experience. I think I wanted to dive a little more into being a bit more vulnerable in this episode. I think we definitely took a different approach. I broke it down a little more sentence by sentence. But I think there were a lot of beautiful lessons there. I think there were a lot of small things that were very worthy of being reflected on, right? And I appreciate you letting me share those with you. I hope that they resonated with you in some way, and that you found something that was beneficial to you. Whether you're new to this podcast or just returning to join us, thank you so much for being here. I hope something in this episode brought light, life, hope, or joy into your day. If it did, and you think it may do that for another, please share it with them so that this flower may bloom into yet another petal. I would also love to hear your thoughts, reflections, and connections on what we shared. Feel free to share all of those things with me on our social medias, especially our Instagram at InnerBloomPod. That's InnerBloom POD. I'm actually going to be offering a free tarot reading to the first 100 followers who DM me. And to anybody who comments on the post, you'll have a chance to hear that comment read on our next episode. If there was something that resonated with you, a memory that came up, an inspiration, whatever it might be. So tell us your story, and let's share the energy of blooming together. And if you'd like to carry the energy of the flower with you, check out our merch store. It's linked on the Instagram or at shop.innerbloom.pod.com. I officially received my first t-shirt and hoodie, and I am obsessed. They're so comfortable, and I wrote some words of affirmation on the hoodie, and it just feels really good and empowering to wear that around with me. If you're looking for more spoken content, we of course have these episodes on Tuesday and Thursday, but I'm working on exclusive meditations just for our Patreon and Coffee. Examples include affirmations for abundance, peace, love, joy, and gentleness. I'm also finishing recording a full audiobook of the Prophet so you can be gently carried, uplifted, and empowered by its words from beginning to end. And speaking of beginning to end, I think we've brought ourselves to the end of our time here today. We'll be back on Thursday with guided affirmations over the same themes we explored today. And then we'll be back on Tuesday for our special Valentine's Day episode titled On Love. We're going to pick up exactly where Almitra left off and officially dive into the first poem by the Prophet. What a beautiful one. What a beautiful one for it to be love. I'm excited, my friends. Well, till then, I'll be manifesting all the love and light into your lives, and I'm looking forward to hearing your stories. Until the next time, may you be blessed in all of your ways and all of your days. Thank you.